in the 11th chapter of John's Gospel. We've been there a while, haven't we? It is so rich. In the 11th chapter of John's Gospel, in the 25th verse, we're going to hear Jesus speak. Now, this is a good one today. Don't miss it. Verse 25, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into this world. Back in the 11th chapter. We spent a lot of time here, and I'll be honest with you, we're not through. Not even after today, we're not through. Most of the time when we come to the 11th chapter of John's Gospel, we kind of rush through it to get to the resurrection of Lazarus. And we say, wow, and then we go on. But what I hope you're catching as we've been doing this chapter and looking at different sections is that there are a lot of really great truths about Jesus in this passage, this whole chapter. And if we rush along and only get to that one event, we're going to miss all those other truths. And this morning's scripture passage is a prime example of that. If we'll look, we'll see some truths that'll enrich our hearts and lives and teach us some things about Jesus that if we didn't know, we needed to know. Now here we are. Jesus has come to Bethany. He's arrived at the outskirts of town, and without waiting on him to come to the house where Martha and Mary, the sisters of Lazarus, are waiting. Martha hears he's coming, and she leaves the house and she goes to meet him and meets him outside of the town. What we discover when we listen to that meeting is Martha is a little bit limited in her understanding and in her belief of Jesus. The truth is, I think she reminds us of many of the people in our world. Maybe you and I fit in that category as we look at Jesus. Here's what we hear. She's sure that had Jesus come before her brother died, he could have healed her brother. He's seen Jesus healed before. She's heard of Jesus healing before. But what she hears when she listens to him is that he's revealing to her he's a whole lot more than she ever thought about him being. He's a whole lot more than most of us ever thought about him being. And as he begins to share that, then he comes to her with this question. Do you believe this? Let's look at what he said, and let's apply the question. Do you believe I am the resurrection? Jesus said, I am the resurrection. What we find here is the fifth of the great I am statements Jesus made. You remember I am actually translates out to the name of God that God gave to Moses way back in the 3rd chapter of Exodus when Moses said, who are you? And God said, I am. It's the holy name of God. Jesus, this is the 5th time he is making an emphatic statement using the name of God, I am. More than that, this resurrection of Lazarus is the 7th miracle that John has in his gospel. Matter of fact, it's the last one. Every one has been designed to show us something. This 7th one is the pinnacle of what John's trying to get across to us as he shares this miracle right here. Now, what's all of this saying? It's saying, listen, pay attention. This passage is important. Don't miss it. Catch this. There's something here. We need to hear. So what is it, you ask? What's so important in what Jesus is saying? What's so important are the great truths he's going to relate about himself. You remember, what we're doing is we're trying to learn about Jesus. We're trying to get a better insight. We're trying to understand him more clearly and deeper. So that's what's going on right here. So listen to me and hear what Jesus says. I'll repeat the words. Jesus said, I am the resurrection. That's my emphasis. I am the resurrection. The is singular. Jesus is saying, I am the only source. You can't go anywhere else. If you want the possibility of a resurrection, you and I have to come to Jesus. Our world is filled with false gods and false teachers who claim all kinds of other ways for resurrection. But Jesus says, I am the resurrection. Now let's just be honest. Let's recognize what's going on here. This is a God claim. It's not a teacher claim. It's not a prophet claim. This is a God claim. God is the one who has the power over life and death, and Jesus is claiming the power of God for himself. For himself. God's the originator of life. God's the one that can own, and God's the only one that can restore life. And Jesus is saying, what you recognize is possible for God is possible for me. Our world keeps grabbing a hold of Jesus and they try to make him less than he is. And they try to relegate him to something we can understand and to a person that maybe is good. But what's Jesus doing here? He's laying a very significant and very powerful claim. I am the resurrection, the only source for resurrection. You can't go anywhere. You can't go to anyone else. You have to come to me for resurrection. The resurrection of Lazarus that's going to take place in a little while after these words will be a very vivid and a very dramatic illustration of the power of Jesus Christ. In a little while, he's going to be crucified. What's going to happen to the faith of his followers? They're going to look at Lazarus and they're going to see the power of God displayed in Jesus. And so to Martha, and through Martha to all of us, Jesus is making a very defining statement. Want eternal life? Want a chance to rise from the dead? Come to Jesus. So here's the first great truth. I am the resurrection. And the only resurrection that any of you have any hope of having. Do you believe this? Do you believe I am the giver of life? In the 23rd and 4th verses, we didn't read those, but let me just recap them for you. Jesus has come to Bethany. Martha has come to Jesus. Jesus looks at her and he says, your brother will rise again. And Martha figures he's referring to the resurrection at the end of time. That's what you and I would think. Somebody says that to us. And she says, yes, I believe he'll rise in the last day. What's she doing there? Martha is making an abstract statement of faith that she believes in the resurrection in the end of time. And that's what she's doing. And that directly precedes what Jesus said. In Jesus' response, is for her and for you and me a clarion call. If that's all you got, you don't have enough. You don't understand. Open your mind and see more. Jesus is not willing for you and I to have a lesser view of Him and who He is and what He can do. There is no limitation on what Jesus can do. And we still tend to think that way. He can do what He chooses to do and what He sets out to do. That's what He's trying to tell us. Now, Martha and Mary, they believed that Jesus could heal their brother. I've touched on that before. The only trouble is, they believed that Jesus could heal their brother if He had gotten there at the same time they sent their message, because He died before the message ever got to him. But Lazarus has been dead 4 days at this point. Here's what you might be missing. It's real easy. Their belief in His ability ended 4 days ago. Because Lazarus is dead, they had no concept of Him being able to do anything now. Just had He gotten there back then. Her faith stopped at the death of her brother. Her only option was to grieve Him. Her only hope was at the end of time she too would find resurrection with Him and they could be united together once more. You know, there's an unsettling fact about death, isn't there? The unsettling thing about death is we cannot control it. We can't. We can't control when death is going to come. We can't control for whom death is going to come. Death is beyond our ability to really handle or control. So, when death comes for someone loved like Lazarus, the person's gone. There's no more hope. There's no more chance. But what Martha and Mary failed to understand is the fact that Lazarus had been dead 4 days at the time was past was not a barrier for Jesus. Time is not a barrier. Death is not a hindrance for Him. He is life. He said, I am the life. And He can give it at any time. Martha's faith and view of Jesus was limited, probably like many of us. She figured that He was special, but in her mind, death overcame it until the end of time. There is no resurrection. And there is no life after death, except for believers. Jesus can, without limit, give life. That's what He's saying to her when He says, I am the resurrection and the life. I am not limited. Death does not stop me. Face it, aren't most of us where Martha was? So, do you believe this? Do you believe this? That He's the resurrection and there is no other? Do you believe that time doesn't hinder Him? And death can't stop Him because He's the life. So let's come back to our question. Do you believe this? Jesus ended His statement with that question. Do you believe this? And I read that and I said, wow, that's a penetrating question. If you take it into your heart and you stop and you think about it, now that you and I understand the tremendous claims that Jesus is making about himself, his question takes on a whole lot more significance for you and for me. Here's why. It's a call not for abstract belief that, yep, someday it's all going to be. But it's a call for faith here and now. Personal faith, personal trust. Jesus didn't ask Martha, Martha, do you believe that I'm going to raise Lazarus? That's not really what he asked her. Rather, he said, do you believe personally that I have the power of resurrection, raising someone to life? Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. Do you understand what that means? There is hope in no other. When Jesus says, do you believe this? To believe this means to believe what he just said about himself and the truths that he just revealed about himself. Martha, do you believe what I've told you? Can you put aside the abstract nature and grab a hold of what I've said? To believe means to embrace it, to trust in it. It means to hold to his promise and to enjoy the hope that he gives. Do you believe, Martha, that the man standing there in front of you is the resurrection and the life, and there's no other source? He asks the question. Let's put it in modern language. Okay, Martha, decision time is here. What are you going to decide? You're going to try to console yourself with the things that folks around you tell you are true, that there'll be a resurrection at the end of time? Or are you going to recognize who's standing right here before you, who is saying what he is about himself? And are you going to put your faith in that? And Martha said, Lord, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God that was to come into this world. Let me tell you what the Greek says. In the Greek, she is saying, I have come to believe, and now I believe. It's settled. She's recognizing where she was. But her belief is settled now. It's locked in. She's sure. She's centered it on the person of Jesus Christ. And none other. And none other. Okay, world. Okay, you and me. It's decision time. It's decision time. Do you believe this? All this truth that he shared? Are you still nebulous, unsure, uncertain?